how can you be successful at reading the scriptures this year? We know it's important, right? The psalm writer says, your word is like honey or like a lamp to my feet. And when Jesus was walking with his disciples, he said, are you guys going to walk away from me? They said, no, you have the words of life. It's life and death. And Psalm 1, it says, the blessed man, the happiest, most satisfied human being alive is the one who meditates on your word day and night and walks in their path. So we're right at the end of the year. And looking back at this past year, you may feel like you just weren't that successful. You didn't read the Bible like you expected to or felt like you should. And I want you to succeed at reading the Bible. I want you to know the God who is speaking through the scriptures. So I've got 5 ways you can get started reading the Bible this year. Sort of like 5 tips. So here they are. Tip number 1, when it comes to reading the Bible, set a goal. Set a goal that is specific and measurable. Make it achievable. Make it realistic and timed. So when you say, I want to read more of the Bible, it's like, well, how much more? That's not specific. But let me give you an example. Youth at Bahama on Wednesday, we're going to read John chapter 2. In fact, this winter and spring, we're going to read for 20 weeks, we're going to read the Gospel of John. So in John chapter 2, there's 3 chunks. The first chunk talks about the wedding at Cana. The next chunk talks about Jesus cleansing the temple. And the last little bit says, Jesus knows what is in man. So youth, here's a goal. Between now and Wednesday, pick 3 different days and read one of those chunks from John chapter 2, and on Wednesday, we'll talk about it. That's a specific goal, it's realistic, and it's got a time limit on it. We can come back and talk about it, okay? So, tip number 1, set a goal. Make sure you start with small, achievable goals. Tip number 2, read at the same place and time. Same place, same time. I have a chair in my house, and right by that chair, I've got a lamp and a candle, and I get a coffee mug, and I show up at this place at 6 a.m. most days of the week. And what I've learned is that consistency is king. I've built a habit of coming to this place almost like I'm going on a date. It's like, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to meet with God in the scriptures, and that consistency wins out even on days that I don't feel like reading. I've built a consistent habit. So I don't know what your habit would be. Maybe it would be 9 p.m. in your room after your homework is done, or maybe it would be at 6 a.m. in the morning, or maybe it's during your lunch break. But pick a place, pick a time, and make that your consistent reading place. So set a goal, choose a specific place and time. Tip number 3, snag a friend. Don't do this alone. You try to do things alone, you will fail. That's what I've learned. Get a friend who will encourage you. And if you don't have a friend that will encourage you in your goal to read the scriptures, get better friends. And become a better friend, someone who's interested in the deeper things. You know what's really cool? If you ask a friend, you say, look, reading the scriptures is important to me. I feel a little bit like a faker. I haven't read much. So will you this week, I'm planning to read John chapter 2. Will you just encourage me? And I'll tell you what I read. If you ask for that kind of help, then it's totally natural by the time next week rolls around to talk about what you read in the scriptures. You might have found, you've never found it's easy to talk with your friends about what you're reading in the Bible. This is one way to get headed that direction. If you can't think of anyone your own age, ask a parent or a sibling or a mentor or a preacher. Just ask someone to check in with you specifically about your reading goal. So get a friend involved. Tip number 4, stash your phone or whatever distracts you. Look, reading the scriptures is a chance for an intimate connection with the living God. Distraction is the death of intimacy. It just is. If you bring a phone into that space or whatever, you're kidding yourself. You know, you don't really want to connect with God. You want to entertain yourself and say you read the Bible. So just be honest about it. You know, don't bring distractions into that place. Start with a small goal, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You might literally be addicted to your phone. You might literally have moments of panic and anxiety if you're without it. And this is really important to find out, is this true about you? It might not be. It's true of a lot of people. So it's time to start weaning yourself off of that device. All right. Tip number 5, study to know God. The whole point of reading the scriptures is not to say we read the Bible. The point is to meet with the living God. So invite the Holy Spirit to speak to you. Here's the prayer I like to pray. This is called a prayer for illumination. It says, open my eyes that I may behold wondrous things out of your law. You know Daniel from the Old Testament? Daniel was kind of famous from the lion's den thing, and God was speaking to him. And so he was famous as this guy that God would speak to. Well, one night, the king in this pagan, godless country, this king woke up from a nightmarish dream, but he couldn't remember the dream. So he called all his wise men and he said, explain to me this terrifying dream. Explain to me what it means. And they said, sure. What did you dream? And he said, I don't remember. So if you're really so wise, if you really hear from God, first tell me what I dreamed and then tell me what it means. And if you can't, you're all gonna die. So Daniel went to bed that night knowing if God didn't open his eyes, if God didn't speak to him in the morning, he and all his friends would die. Talk about pressure. So in the night, God speaks. God delights to show Daniel his word. And so he tells him the dream. He tells him what it means. And in the morning, as you can imagine, Daniel is dancing through the halls. He is singing. He is shouting. He is overjoyed that he's not going to die. And he says in Daniel chapter 2, he says about God, he says, he reveals deep and hidden things. And that's my prayer for you, that this year you would be successful at reading the scriptures and that God would reveal deep and hidden things. So at the end of the year, you would look back and you would say, oh my goodness, I know God.